Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as the Empire against the Lizardmen led by Prairie Dog on the map Schwarzhofen. And of course, we are trying to get in as many matches as we can of the old world races against the new world races or vice versa. Just to kind of test them out, see what the meta is and just see what works and what doesn't. Obviously, Empire was one of the factions that definitely got, I think, hit kind of hard, or definitely got, I think it definitely got a little hit kind of hard by the changes. Now, Hellblaster got some pretty significant buffs. Pistoliers got reworked a little bit. I think they're still garbage, unfortunately. But Demigryphs got changed. Now they have 24 models, but which means they're a little more susceptible to model losses, but they don't hit too much weaker. So potentially they're more DPS, but they have a less. They have more potential to also lose that DPS quickly, especially to, just because of model sniping. The change to hero mechanics as well has also, I think, hurt Empire a decent amount. The fact that you can only field 2 heroes now definitely makes it a little harder. Before, one of my standard strategies, and the standard strategy for a lot of players, was really to bring 2 Empire captains and a wizard. And now you're no longer really able to do that. So unless you bring either Barfus Arkelt or drop a captain for a wizard or something like that, then you're not really able to do that. Regardless, I did try to make an army here that would work against Lizardmen without fielding a wizard. For my lord, I did bring Boris, Toadbringer. Good old Toady has actually gotten a new item, the White Cloak of Ulrich, which is pretty awesome. Big old AoE debuff of -9 melee attack and -6% speed, which is very useful. When combined with Crush the Weak, which though debuffed is still very strong, and of course Midland Runefang healing him, all that sort of stuff, it makes Boris very, very powerful. I'd actually hold the line here on him, which I think is was a bit of a waste. That's not really necessary, given that. Or actually, you might be getting affected by the Empire captains. I think. I'm not actually sure if I left that on him or not. I might have. If I did, that was definitely a bit of a mistake. Because I'll be flying around with Boris a whole bunch. For my alongside him, as mentioned before, I did bring 2 Empire captains, stripped down almost completely. The only thing they brought is hold the line, simply to give that charge resistance to all the units around him. And my front line, or my infantry line, is really, really weak. It's mostly spearmen, and of course spearmen against lizards are not going to do very well. Saurus warriors with shields will turn these guys, will chew through these guys relatively quickly. But my hope is that the spearmen will hold out long enough for my handguns and my rear line to really do a lot of work. I do also have the Sigmar Sons mixed in here, and of course the main goal here is just to have massive width of army, backed by those Empire captains. The Sigmar Sons here in the middle will definitely give me some solid staying power that can hopefully just hold the line when all else fails. Behind that, of course, I do have 4 units of shooting. 2 units of handguns, Stirland's Revenge, and then the Silver Bullets. The Stirland's Revenge and the Silver Bullets both have stalk, so they could hopefully catch my opponent by surprise, and they can do a lot of hurt to enemy large targets. This is definitely one of my core counters to enemy monsters, and of course Lizardmen are famous for monsters, so that's something I'm a little worried about. Out on the flanks, I do have, on one hand, Demigryph Knights with halberds, who recently got reworked, and then of course the Royal Dwarf Gryphites, which similarly got reworked. And these guys can deliver fear and terror bombs to my enemy's backline, and hopefully if they catch enemy cavalry or anything like that, they can hopefully lay the smack down on them a little bit, and really crush them pretty decisively is my hope. Or crush enemy lords or on large mounts like say Krokar, that sort of stuff. Now you can see already I'm getting ballista fire from the enemy ancient Stegodon, or the normal Stegodon, on which the Skink Priest is mounted. And my opponent is pushing forwards Bastillodon with Solar Engine. My opponent's army is much more, I think it's a pretty conventional army as far as Lizardmen go. A front line composed of Saurus warriors with shields, just to give them a little more tankiness. Skink cohorts on the flanks. These guys might actually not trade all that. I think these guys might actually lose out the Empire Spears in a straight up fight, just because they have very low per model HP. And their melee defense is very, very bad when compared to spearmen. So I think these guys might actually lose in a straight-up fight against Empire Spears. Behind Behind that, of course, my opponent does have a single unit of Temple Guards to shut down any large I might bring. These guys, of course, don't rampage, and they have armor piercing, anti-large. They're just a very powerful unit in general. My opponent also has 2 units of Chameleon Skinks, who, of course, could do well against my squishy units, and they're very resistant to any ranged fire, bring even the magic damage, because it's simply a missile resistance rather than a physical resistance, like on the Gutter Runners. On the flank, my opponent has put Cold One Spear Riders, who, of course, have anti-large, and that could they could definitely do some nasty damage even to my Demigryphs. I have to be careful about that. And here in the heart of his army, my opponent did bring Kroq-Gar, though without Hand of Gods. I've been noticing people don't really bring that for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's actually a pretty good ability to bring for a relatively low price, but I guess I can kind of see why not. It's the 200 points could go somewhere else. Vestalodon, of course, could provide debuffs and a lot of damage with its splash, and of course he could rampage through my troops. It's very well armored, so the spears, despite being anti-large, will do very little to it. And it's a similar case with Screen Priest of the Heavens here. And I think Screen Priest of the Heavens is a little bit of an interesting choice against Empire. I think you'd be better off, rather than bring Comet of Cassandora and Chain Lightning like my opponent did here and Wind Blast, you'd probably be better off, in my opinion, against Empire, bringing a Lore of Beasts Skink Priest with Flock of Doom. Simply because Empire tends to bring a lot of squishy infantry, whether ranged or melee, and I think that would perform better. Regardless, I'm trying to be very careful. You can see my opponent sniping at the Empire Captains, which is definitely not something I appreciate, but I'm trying to be careful with the Demigryphs and avoid losing models on them. In the meantime, my opponent is pushing forward with the Bastiladon, which is a bit of a weird move. I'm not entirely sure what my opponent was thinking here, but he overextends with the Bastiladon, and I immediately annihilate it, basically from full HP, with some disgusting crossfire from all of my shooting units. And it basically goes down like a 9-pin in a matter of seconds. And there you can see it breaks, and it actually doesn't shatter, which is a little unfortunate, but it definitely breaks. It's falling apart. Over here, the Royal Altar of Griffites are trying to swing around, but I don't want to commit him against the Temple Guard. And I actually start pulling him away to avoid those Cold One Spear Riders. And you can see I'm actually pushing straight in. Once again, I'm trying to get the charge bonus off. I want to push into close quarters, tie my opponent down, and go from there. Chain Lightning is going down on my Sigmar Sons, and I see it at the last second. I'm actually going to avoid it a little bit with the Sterling's Revenge there. Unfortunately, it's going to clip my spears here a little bit, but that's not the end of the world. That's okay. I can live with that. Over here, the Skink cohort has fallen apart to the Demigryph charge instantly, being terrified by the Demigryph Knights with Halberds and Boris, who's dropped down somewhere in here, over here. In the meantime, my handguns are simply unloading on the Skink Priest of Heavens, making sure that he's not going to have a good day at all. I do see that there's these Temple Guard trying to flank around, and I pull these spears away, leave these spears to fight the Skink cohort alone. Here with the Empire Captains in the mix, I'm hoping that the Spears and Sigmar Sons and all them will be able to hold fairly well. Over here, Demigryph Knights do engage Kroq-Gar, and my hope was that they would actually win against Kroq-Gar, being anti-large units. Turns out I'm wrong. Regardless, over here, Royal Altar of Griffites do not get their charge off on the Cold One Spear Riders. They are kind of obstructing their own shooting, so they're going to start taking friendly fire. And you can see they're definitely trading not that well against the Cold One Spear Riders. They're getting torn apart pretty badly. The fact that I didn't get the charge off here is going to come back and bite me in the rear. But these Cold One Spear Riders are going to die to a man. They are trying to, I think, force path through my handguns, and it's just not working for them. Over here, though, Kroq-Gar has absolutely man-moded my poor Demigryphs, and you can see they're down to 7 models, and they get terror-routed off, which is absolutely brutal. I actually didn't anticipate it would go this one-sided in Kroq-Gar's favor. And now Kroq-Gar does turn around, and he's going after Boris, and just trying to get it into my backline here. Now, I want nothing to do with it. You can see, I'm going to, or sorry, not Boris, my Empire Captain here. Boris is actually over here, and Boris is being harassed and annoyed by the Chameleon Skinks, and I try to push him here into the back of the Skink cohort, just trying to bounce around and terror out. Things are definitely not looking as good as I would have liked. Otherwise, you can see the Bastiladon has actually recovered and come back, but the Skink Priest is shattered, so at least he will not be coming back. With this concentrated fire there from all my handguns and whatnot, my opponent Kroq-Gar is going to go down very, very quickly. Over here, the Spears are actually trading fairly well with the Temple Guard, which is a little surprising. All things considered, given that these guys only cost a quarter of what Temple Guard cost, the Temple Guard is actually not trading that well with them. And over here, Kroq-Gar is getting absolutely annihilated by the focused fire from the handguns. And he ends up breaking at 600 HP. Unfortunately, I do not pursue, and this is simply because I assumed he would break and rout, and I thought he was shattered. It is actually kind of a little difficult to tell with the flags. The flags will often turn white, and you assume that the unit has shattered, and it's actually just broken because their little unit icon turns almost bleached white, and it's really hard to tell, at least in my opinion, sometimes, especially when you're in the heat of the moment. So Krokar will recover. Over here, I do charge these Star Warriors with shields. At this point, most of my opponent's army is falling apart. You can see the Royal Altdorf fights actually. Sorry, I mistook those for the normal Demigryphs. Actually, do catch this Bastillodon and are clubbing it down. It actually breaks, but it stays alive, just barely. It doesn't shatter. Over here on the in the meantime, I'm not entirely sure where my Demigryphs have gone. Actually, they should be in here somewhere. There's my normal Demigryph Knights. And unfortunately, you can see the Royal Altdorf fights are just fleeing over here, just fleeing off the map, I do believe. And the Bastillodon is broken, and I don't believe it's going to be coming back. It might as well be shattered. You can see my opponent is trying to kind of do a last-ditch effort here with his Temple Guard, and I'm just cross-firing with the handguns. You can see the handgun fire from the Empire is brutal. Now, Star Warriors' shields do rampage and they get through, but I do have some spearmen around. I've got these spearmen over here. I'm pushing them into the fray, just trying to tie these Star Warriors down and prevent them from doing too much damage to my handgun line. Because now my infantry is very, very badly mauled. I'm pulling Boris back to deal with these Star Wars. My infantry is very badly mauled, and so I'm definitely relying on my shooting contingent to win me this game. Over here, the Royal Altdorf fights are wavering. You can see the Bastillodon's completely done. After being broken initially, this is the second break, and it's practically dead, so it's not going to be making a comeback. And it's only secured 12 kills this game, which is really rather pitiful. Over here, my handgun line is simply annihilating the Star Warriors. I have and actually these are Sterling's Revenge, my bad, but Sterling's Revenge is just annihilating these guys. And Sterling's Revenge could probably finish them off in melee as well. Fortunately, the Demigryphs over here do get routed simply by Krokar coming in. You can see he did pop Cold-Blooded and healed up a whole bunch outside of combat. Healed for about a little over 1,000 of his HP. And now the last fight over here is going down between Sigmar's Sons, the Skink cohorts, and some of the remaining Temple Guards. Because, of course, as they rampage, most of the Star Warriors kind of overextend and end up getting annihilated by the spears and handgun fire. Boris is still around kicking, but at this point it is a Pyrrhic victory as my opponent's army simply shatters. So as you can see, the damage was actually pretty well distributed. Sterling's Revenge raked in a lot of kills. The spears raked in a surprising amount of kills, as did Sigmar's Sons. The Demigryphs performed very badly, and I think this comes down mostly to this largely just comes down to my mismanagement. You can see the Empire captains performed fairly well, as did Boris. For my opponent, you can see the Star Warriors did immensely well, which was not surprising. It was expected that they would crash through the spearmen really effectively. Similarly, the Temple Guard plowed through the spears pretty effectively. Skinks traded very badly. Skinks are very quick on their feet, and if my opponent had gotten into my backline, they could have definitely been a pain in the rear with my handguns. But against the spears, they will not win. Their stats are too low to fight spears effectively. The Skink Priest of the Heavens, my opponent's large contingent basically got annihilated by ranged fire. Krokar, the Skink Priest, and the Cold One Spear Riders, and Bastillodon. Now, I made a huge mistake by allowing my Royal Altdorf fights to get caught by the Cold One Spear Riders without getting their own charge bonus off. And that resulted in my Royal Altdorf fights taking a massive amount of damage, and of course I had no magic available, so there was no way to heal them up and keep them alive. The Demigryphs, similarly, I overestimated their ability to take on Krokar, and they failed miserably. Krokar absolutely stomped and munched through them with Grimlock. So definitely some lessons learned there about the effectiveness of Demigryphs. I still think that if you can get the charge off, and against the majority of the Lizardmen monsters roster, plus just for pinning enemy lords in place with their mass while you're shooting brings them down, I still think Demigryphs are very good. But don't overestimate their power. Don't do what I did in this game, where I really overestimated how good they would do against Grimlock and Krokar, and ended up getting bitten in the rear by it. Yeah, handgun lines I think are very good against lizards because Lizardmen units tend to have fairly poor melee stats, which means that, and they're fairly expensive, especially the Saurus warriors. So your spear, like if they bring, for example, if they bring skinks, your spears will be able to trade with them effectively. So if they do a mass build, your spears will be able to do okay, and your demigryphs can just plow through them. If they decide to go for this sort of build with more Saurus warriors, your spears will hold long enough, while your handguns are able to first focus out any support units and then tear through the Saurus warriors, who are not particularly mobile either. For my opponent, I think he would have been better off trying to utilize either his skinks skirmishers for shutting down my range contingent, and probably his normal skinks for shutting down my range contingent. Had that occurred, Krokar would have basically had free reign, as would have the Stegodon on the Skink Priest. The overcommitting of the Bastillodon in the early game was also a bit of a painful loss. I'm not entirely sure what my opponent was thinking there, but it ended up costing him a potentially useful support unit in the early game. And I think that later on the Bastillodon would have been much better used at shutting down the ranged fire with its blind effect. But definitely a good game to my opponent. It was definitely pretty tough, and it was interesting just to see how Empire would deal with the fact that it's limited down to. I think Empire is definitely one of the factions that got hit hardest by the hero count or hero hero limit. Because Empire was definitely one of those factions where 3 heroes was not nowhere near out of the way for you. Whereas most other factions usually wouldn't field 3 heroes, in my opinion, or a lot of other factions you wouldn't. But definitely, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Total War Warhammer 2, and any suggestions or recommendations for comps you'd like to see or units you'd like to see demonstrated, be sure to post those down in the comments, and I'll respond as soon as I can. I'll be continuing doing content, of course, for Warhammer 2. Now that Mortal Empires is out, I'm not really going to be investing too much time into Warhammer 1. I'm a little... With the fact that Mortal Empires come out and the strategies, I think that I'm definitely going to see how I'd go with the campaign guides. I was going to finish Wurzag, and I'm on the fence about finishing all the Warhammer 1 guides, or whether or not I should simply move on to Total War Warhammer 2 and focus on faction guides for that, because those would of course remain largely applicable to Warhammer 1 as well, for the Mortal Empires guides, because in many ways Mortal Empires is similar. But if you definitely, guys, if you can share your thoughts and opinions on that, if you watched my guides or enjoyed my guides, because I'm definitely on the fence about whether or not I should finish up my Warhammer 1 guides, or if I should simply jump ship to fully commit to Warhammer 2. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.